First thing I want to start with is removing the wheel, and if you have the hubcaps that screw on with these little caps, go ahead and remove those with a 19mm socket. Okay, now you can remove the wheel, again with a 19mm socket. There we go. To replace this caliper, the first thing I want to do is break free this banjo bolt with a wrench, 11mm. This is going to help me take it off once the caliper is removed. I don't want to leave this off, otherwise it's just going to keep dripping fluid. So I'm going to take the caliper off, set it aside, and then at the end, I'm going to swap over the hose. Next, with a 15mm socket, remove these two bolts that hold the bracket of the caliper onto the knuckle. I'm just going to remove the whole assembly. Okay, leave this on just a few threads. Remove the bolts, remove your caliper, and set it aside safely so it does not fall and put pressure on this brake hose. Now before I install the new bracket, I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on these areas here. This is where your anti-rattle clips will go, and you just want to put enough to prevent rust, but not enough to actually get it squeezed out onto the rotor once the anti-rattle clips are on. You don't want that much. Take the anti-rattle clips and just press them on. Make sure they line up. You want to do this for both sides. And if you do have any excess grease, go ahead and wipe it off. At this point, I'm going to install the caliper bracket onto the knuckle. Start in the two bolts. Snug them up and torque them to 85 foot-pounds. At this point, what I want to do is remove these slider pins and just add some grease. I know it's a new caliper and it comes with grease, but I just want a little bit extra. And the way I'm going to do that is actually just put it right inside of this boot here. That's going to act as a reserve of grease as the slider pins go in and out and operate. And I'm going to make sure that there is some on that upper ridge there. That's where the boot goes, and it needs to seal up, and grease is going to help it seal up. Okay, slide the slider pin on, press it in to lock the boot, give it a couple spins and make sure all the air is squeezed out. Wipe off any excess grease, and let's do the same to the other one. Remove it, add just a little bit of grease in there, work it in, add some to the slider pin, put it back in. To squeeze out the air, you can press it and then squeeze the boot. Wipe off any excess grease that might have come out. Now from the old caliper, go ahead and remove your pads. There we go. The inner pad had this wear indicator. So I'm going to start with my outer pad, slide that on. Wear indicator goes on the bottom. Slide this pad on. Now before the caliper goes on, I like to put just a little bit of grease on these two ears here. That'll help the pads operate quietly and smoothly. And I'm also going to put some on this outer ring of the piston for the same reason. Slide the caliper on. Make sure that it lines up with these slider pins. They're actually cut out to line up with the caliper, so spin them if needed. Let's get these two bolts on to secure it. Snug them up and then torque them to 26 foot-pounds. 26 foot-pounds. Okay, now get the new banjo bolt out of the caliper, as well as these two copper washers that came with it. You definitely do not want to reuse the old copper washers. When you remove it, leave one on the banjo bolt. Now with a collection bucket underneath, I'm going to remove the old banjo bolt from the caliper, from the old caliper. There we go. Set that aside, drain the old caliper, and recycle it. At this point, you'll notice that the old banjo bolt has this triangulated washer that's stuck on it. I'm going to grab it with some locking pliers and then spin the bolt out. And now I'm just going to spin this bolt off. Basically, what I'm trying to do is unthread this copper washer off of the bolt. Perfect. Now that that's off, remove the old banjo bolt from the hose. Clean up the hose, make sure that there's no debris on it. Grab the new hose, stick it through with that one copper washer, put on your second copper washer, start it onto the caliper. Let's snug it up. Now I'm going to grab my wrench and tighten it. I like to go about half a turn to maybe 3/4 after it's bottomed out. Basically what you want to do is crush those two copper gaskets, and that's what's going to create a nice tight seal. Now that that's tight, clean down your area. That way you can make sure that there are no leaks. And with a 10mm, let's open this bleeder screw Take the boot off with a 10 millimeter. Let's open up this bleeder screw. Now we'll let gravity do its work and pull the fluid down, push the air out. Once that's done and we have no more air coming out through the gravity bleed, you can perform a full manual brake bleed, which consists of topping off your master cylinder, make sure it's full, have someone in the car pumping up the brake pedal a few times to create pressure. Once that's done, have them hold pressure on the brake pedal, and then with pressure being held, open up the bleeder screw. Watch out because fluid will come shooting out. Once the pedal has reached the floor, close up the bleeder screw, pump it again, open it, and so on until you get no more air coming out of here. And once that's done, then we can finish up everything. Okay, we have a steady trickle of fluid. I'm going to go ahead and close it up now. Make sure it's nice and snug. Let's clean up the mess. Some brake parts cleaner. Put the little boot back on to make sure debris doesn't make its way inside the bleeder hole. And now let's get the wheel on. Let's get the wheel back on. Start on all 5 of your lug nuts, bottom them out, and then torque them to 100 foot-pounds. Don't forget about the hubcap. You want to line up the valve stem with the special cutout for it, but also line it up with all the lug nuts so you can thread on these caps for them. This is what's going to hold your hubcap on. So make sure these are on there, otherwise it's going to go flying. All right, off you go.